Guys, welcome to our first video about poured in place. This is going to be a video that covers the overall process of how to install poured in place rubber. This particular case, it's being installed on top of a concrete slab around the playground. The same procedure would work whether you were doing a pool or on another surface. We prefer installing our poured in place on top of concrete or asphalt. In either case, it can also be installed on top of a crushed aggregate or stone base. It's real important to remember, if you are installing on top of stone or crushed aggregate, that you get your drainage just right. You may have to install drains. So you can see here we got the playground installed. We've got all the form boards set in place, and we've got our welded wire mesh in place, getting ready to pour the slab. We got the slab graded out so that it drains correctly. And we've got all the equipment installed with a 6.5-inch assumed surfacing height. That's going to take into account the height of the concrete, as well as our SBR layer, and also our top wear coat layer of EPDM. This is probably a good point to go ahead and point out the fact that one video is not going to be enough to really cover everything that you need to know about poured in place surfacing. A lot of the topics that are covered in this video really need their own video to be more detailed and specific about it. And we're going to try to get those videos out to you guys just as soon as we can. Do some more videos on priming, on edge details, on subsurface preparation, the differences between EPDM and TPV, what types of binders to be using, how they're going to react in different temperatures and different humidity settings. You can see here they're finishing the concrete out for the playground right now. And like I said before, we're going to be working on getting those videos out to you guys just as soon as we can. A lot of this stuff you can really only learn from experience and from working with it firsthand. You can see here the concrete has been fully cured. We let it sit for about 4 days out in the sun. It was finished with the broom. It's real important that when you install poured in place that you're working on a completely dry surface. The binders that are used are moisture cured, and when they come in contact with water, they can either cure prematurely, which we call hypercuring, or the binders may react with the water and create a foam that's known as polyuria. Either one of those situations is not good. So now we're going to look at installing the SBR layer. If you look here, here's a little trick we do. We wax down the inside of our mortar mixer. We take golf wax, melt it down, and apply it with a brush. That's really going to help keep your mix. What we're doing here is making the primer. The primer is pretty much a blend of the binder and acetone, or you can use dibasic ester. It's pretty safe to go ahead and mix it 50% binder, 50% acetone. There are going to be certain situations where you're going to want to use a different ratio. If you're doing an entryway, for instance, around doors or butting up to walls, you may want to use more binder and less acetone with your primer. Priming all your areas is extremely important. A lot of installers will overlook this step. It's extremely important. Make sure that you're always priming. It's an extra step and it does take more time, but it's well worth it. It's going to make the job last a lot longer. Alright, so right here what we're doing is measuring out the binder for the SBR layer. The binder for the SBR is going to be mixed at 1 gallon per 55-pound bag. In this particular case, we're going to be mixing 2 bags at a time, so we're going to be using 2 gallons of binder. You want to add the binder in slowly and evenly as the SBR is mixing. You want to allow that binder to mix thoroughly. It usually takes 1 to 2 minutes. What you don't want to do is ever leave any type of rubber in the mixer longer than it needs to be, nor do you want to ever mix it prematurely. Especially when it's hot and humid outside, that agitation is going to cause it to set up faster. It's going to make it harder to work with. So only make batches of rubber as you need them, and never leave them in the mixer longer than is needed. So here you see that we are applying the primer to our slab. You want to use a generous amount of primer. Make sure you fill in all the voids. You do not want to use too much primer, however. There are some issues that can arise. Blowback is one of those, and again, that's something that we're going to talk about in another video. Luckily on this job we didn't run into any of those issues. Prime thoroughly. You want to prime out no more than an area that you can hit in about a half hour. You also want to prime a little bit ahead of you so that if you've got excess material, once you screed it, you've got somewhere to put it that's on top of a primed surface. Now what this priming does is it really helps the rubber bond much better to the subsurface, but it also helps to lock down all the dust, all the dirt, all the debris that would prevent it from adhering properly. You can see here they're dumping the rubber out. We've got a screed board there that's going to give us the appropriate height, and initially we start off by raking it. You can also use an asphalt loop. You then take a trowel to screed it out to the appropriate level, and you want to pat it gently. If you overpack the SBR, it becomes hard, and it's not going to have the impact absorption it's going to have if you just do it gently. So you want to spread it out, you want to get it level, and you want to gently tap it and get it into place. You never want to roll it or apply too much pressure, because those air pockets are what's going to give you a lot of that cushion. Now another thing that a lot of guys will do here, installers, is they will go ahead and use diesel or kerosene or something like that to lube up their trowel. The problem that we find with that is that you're going to leave a residue on top of this layer, and there's going to be a lot of oil in that residue. So when you come back to install that next layer and you prime it and you're installing the EPDM, it's going to prevent a real good bond from happening. So we don't use any lubricant. If you feel like you need to lube up your trowel, go ahead and use soapy water. Keep in mind though that if you're using water to lubricate your trowel, it's going to speed up the curing on that surface. So if you're not experienced, or if temperatures and humidity are real high, that may be something you want to avoid doing, because by the time you get to the next row of surfacing, your seam might very well be dry, and that can make it very difficult to mend together. Real quick, I want to talk about binders again. There is nothing more important when doing port in place than having a good binder. I don't care how skilled you are, how long you've been doing it. If you're using an inferior binder, it's going to be difficult to work with. The results are not going to be as good, and ultimately the surface is just not going to last. There's a lot of companies out there right now that are making binders or importing them that aren't very good. We've dealt with a few companies in the past, and what winds up happening is that surface is going to start shedding, you're going to start getting holes, and it's not going to hold up. You're going to get called back to fix it and to patch it, and eventually you're going to have to tear it up and replace it. So, go with the best company. Give the guys at OTS a call. They know their product very well, and more importantly, they're going to custom make the product for you. You tell them what kind of temperatures you're working in, where you're working in, and they're going to give you exactly what you need. If you run into problems, you can call them, and they're going to be there to help you. The guys manufacturing the stuff have a tremendous amount of experience with the product, so if you run into an issue, they're going to be able to help you. Whereas a lot of these other companies, you call them and they're just going to leave you hanging. So it's best to go with a company that's been established for a long time, and also someone that really knows a lot about the product because they've been in the business themselves. Now we're moving on to the EPDM layer, or the wear coat. Right there you can see we're measuring out the binder for the wear coat layer. The binder is going to be 1.25 gallons per 55-gallon bag, 55-pound bag. This particular case, it was 3 colors, 50% black, 25% green, and 25% brown. First thing you want to do is add in your base color. In this case it's the black because it's going to make up the majority of the surface. Next you're going to add your color. You always want to measure out your color in buckets. Typically a 55-pound bag will equal 2 5-gallon buckets. Never eyeball your color mixture. It's not going to be consistent and it's going to be noticeable on the surface. You're going to want to mix all your colors dry and let them mix thoroughly. So now you can see we've got approximately 110 pounds of rubber in there, so we're going to be adding 2.5 gallons of binder. Now just like the first layer with this stuff, you want to get it thoroughly mixed. But you do not want to leave it in the mixer longer than you need to, and you don't want to leave any of the rubber mix just sitting around. You need to be mixing it while you need it. If it starts setting up on you, it's going to be real difficult to work. Alright, so now we're using the same primer here. You want to prime a little bit more heavy on top of the SBR layer because it is so porous. Always want to prime out an area ahead of you so that you can move your excess rubber. Try not to prime too wide. You don't want to be kneeling down in that primer. Now what you can see here is one of our guys is screeding out the rubber to its finished height. What he's basically doing is placing the rubber approximately where it's going to be using a screed rod. That guy is very important to the operation. He needs to be working ahead of you, and he needs to know what he's doing to make sure that when you get down there and you're finishing the stuff, you're not constantly having to put more rubber in or take some out. Now here's when we start finishing it. We come in right behind him. You can see we're working on the edge here. On this particular edge, it was just a rolled edge. We're going to have AstroTurf buttoned up next to it. And you see me spraying a trowel there. We're actually using diesel as a trowel lubricant. And what you're going to see us doing here is basically finishing what the screeder started. If he's done his job well, there won't be too much to work out. However, there are going to be some spots that are high or low, and you're going to need to pull some rubber from in front of you and fill those spots in. Now what we're going to start off by doing is working back and forth, crossing across that first row, pushing the rubber past it and then dragging it forward again. And then we're going to swipe that seam from left to right, and then we're going to go over the whole area, applying ample pressure to finish, close, and flatten that rubber. Now this term closing the rubber is used a lot in Pour and Place. It's kind of hard to describe, but when you're troweling rubber, you'll actually see a grain to it. You'll see the pores of the surface open and close. And a real good way to explain that is if you are sitting on a carpet and you run your hand across it, you'll see the carpet kind of open up and you'll see a grain form. And then if you run your hand across it the other way, you'll see that grain close. That's the exact same thing with Pour and Place. You want to pay real close attention to your seams as well. A lot of people have a tendency to put a lot of rubber over their seam. That's not the best way to do it. What you really want to do is push your rubber back and across that seam and then drag it forward again. If you build up a lot of rubber, you're going to see those high spots and it's going to make your seams real obvious. We use trowels sometimes up to 24 inches. We do find though that if you're using a larger trowel, it's harder to get the pressure that you need, so we generally stick with a 14-inch to 16-inch trowel. You'll also notice that we're using a pool trowel. It's got a rounded edge on it. That's going to help prevent trowel marks from popping up, but we do use square trowels when needed. If you're working along a wall, doing an entryway, or around obstacles that are square that have small corners, that smaller trowel is going to come in handy. You also use it a lot when you're doing edging and you need two trowels. Now a lot of people might be watching this video saying, well, you could do that with a Fresno trowel or with a bull float. And the truth is that you can't. The material itself is nothing like concrete. It does not react the same way. If you try to bull float this stuff, you're going to wind up getting caught a few feet out and you're not going to have a way to fix it. The only time you should be using a bull float or a Fresno trowel is if you do notice an error and it's too far out that you can't reach it. You can go ahead and take your chances and try to fix it with a Fresno, but a lot of times even doing that, unless you're very experienced with it, you could wind up making the problem worse. So you can see here that our workers screed more rubber out. Meanwhile, the guys that are mixing that have nothing to do right now are busy cleaning up and priming the areas ahead of us. You want to constantly be working when you're installing this. You guys that are mixing, when they're not mixing, like I said, they need to be cleaning, they need to be priming, lessening the workload throughout the day. You'll also notice that the guys that are mixing are also the ones that are dropping the rubber out for us in small piles. They need to know how much to drop. It's real important that everybody works together symbiotically. You've got to be able to move real quickly from side to side. If you don't, you're going to wind up with a fresh surface butting up to a hard one. It's going to be very difficult to trowel. And like I said, a lot of these topics, you really need an entire video dedicated to them, and we're going to try to get that to you guys just as soon as we can. Primarily though, you want to really focus on keeping the same pattern, working the same way always. If you let one spot sit for too long, it's going to get hard, you're going to get cold seams. Now a lot of times you'll be doing a job that's so big it can't be done in a day, and you will have to seam it. We're going to show you the right way to do that. There is the right way and a wrong way. We're also going to do some videos talking about how to do inlays and patterns, how to do intelligent seaming. If you know you have to make a seam, how can you hide it and make it look intentional? All these things. Guys, feel free to visit our website. It's www.florida-playgrounds.com. You'll find some more information about Port in Place along with the blog and other various things. We're going to be working on those videos and getting them out to you soon. In the meantime, good luck with your Port in Place job.